Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Patricia Jenko. I'm the Wellness Coordinator for New York State PTA and the chair of this wonderful mental health task force. At this time, I would like to introduce Beth Sniffen, and she will be our host for this evening. Go ahead, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Good evening. My name is Beth Sniffen, New York State PTA Outreach Coordinator. I would like to welcome you to our fourth webinar in our series of webinars hosted by the New York State PTA Mental Health Task Force called Conversations on Mental Health. Each year, the New York State PTA has sent its members a survey. Let's talk about youth mental health, asking parents, caregivers, families, educators, and others concerned about children to complete the survey to help us address youth mental health needs and concerns. Please look for and respond to this year's survey. These webinars are planned and presented based on your concerns expressed in those surveys. Joining us this evening are Patricia Frazier, President of New York State PTA, Kyle Belakopitsky, our Executive Director for the New York State PTA, and members of the Mental Health Task Force. Susan Fisher, Resolutions Coordinator, Patricia Jenko, Wellness Coordinator, Amy Heisek, Education Coordinator, Lori Fontana, Field Support Coordinator, Bevan Lannis, Health Specialist, Mary McNamara, Westchester East Putnam, Region Director, Lynn Petrovsky, Recognition Specialist, Maria Sanders, Environmental Specialist, myself, Beth Sniffen, Outreach Coordinator, Joan Wapnick, First VP, New York State PTA, Shorna Wold, Central Hudson Region Director, and Megan Zarkey, Family Engagement Coordinator. Our hosts and moderators for this evening are members of the Mental Health Task Force, Joan Wapnick, New York State PTA First Vice President, and Shorna Wold, Central Hudson Region Director. Mary McNamara, Westchester East Putnam Region Director, and Lynn Petrovsky, New York State PTA Recognition Specialist, will monitor the chat. At this time, I would like to invite our president, Patty Frazier, to welcome everyone to start our conversation tonight. Patty?
Thank you, Beth. And thank you to everyone on the Mental Health Task Force for putting this evening together and for your continued work throughout the year on this most important topic, the mental health of our children. The roots of mental health work in New York State PTA go all the way back to the early 1900s with the forming of New York State PTA. Mental health and the mental health of our children and our families has been an important topic for us and something that we continue to advocate for. It is really a pleasure to be able to continue the work of this mental health task force that was initiated by past President Helen Hoffman. And I want to just thank everybody again for joining us tonight and for also helping us with the survey that Beth mentioned. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Patty, for those heartfelt words of support and encouragement. Before we begin tonight's conversation, I want to state that this webinar series is in no way a substitute for professional help. The purpose of this webinar is to open dialogue with parents, teachers, caregivers, and students on the mental health issues facing us all today, how we can identify concerns and ask for help. Let's start this evening off as we engage in conversations on mental health. Let's talk suicide. Joan and Shorna, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Beth, and welcome, Kristen. Kristen Stanton, Director of School and Youth Initiatives at the New York State Office of Mental Health Suicide Prevention Center, where she oversees statewide suicide prevention programs and manages multiple grant initiatives, including those funded by GLS and CDC. She is certified in New York State as a school counselor and holds a Master of Science and Certificate of Advanced Studies in Counseling and Psychological Services from Oswego State University, along with a Certificate of Advanced Studies in Community Schools from Binghamton University. Her leadership includes co-leading the LGBTQ+ and schools and youth subgroup of the New York State Suicide Prevention Council emphasizing inclusive strategies for supporting at-risk youth. Her commitment to fostering a supportive environment and enhancing mental health services for all students and staff underscores her invaluable contributions to education and community wellness. Kristen?
Thank you. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. Again, my name is Kristen Stanton. And just so everyone knows, the Suicide Prevention Center New York is a subset of the Office of Mental Health. We offer a lot of services across New York State for not just schools and youth, but for adults, communities. We help run community coalitions, and we have a focus on veterans. So we actually serve everyone from birth to adults, but I specifically am in charge of the school and youth initiatives. So thank you for being here. I just want to point out that, sometimes this topic can be a difficult one. So, if at any point you feel you need to take a break or, step away, that's fine. But I want to make sure that you, take care of yourself. And if you feel that you need some more support, you can drop something in the chat, and we, can reach out to you with some more resources. So tonight we're going to talk about, there we go, the importance of suicide prevention. You'll learn how to describe the characteristics of youth who may be in distress, how to start a conversation with those students, how to find support and resources within your community. And we're going to look at what the kids are saying. So Governor Hochul did a tour this past summer, really asking kids, what is it about mental health? What is going on for you? And what do you guys need help with? So we have some answers from them. And then I'm going to talk about our school training portfolio and the trainings that we offer to schools across New York State. So why talk about suicide? Currently, suicide is the third leading cause of death for 10 to 19-year-olds. This is nationwide. This recently dropped from the second leading cause of death to the third leading cause of death. Not because rates dropped, unfortunately, but because rates of gun violence among youth that age has increased over the past few years. So gun violence became the second leading cause of death, and suicide dropped down to the third leading cause. When we look at numbers for 2024, it looks like it might go back up to second, but that's kind of where we are right now. So among U.S. high school students, so this is across the U.S., about 20% have seriously considered suicide in the past year. About 17% have made a plan, and about 10% have at least made one attempt. So if you think about like the average size of a high school classroom, you say that about 1 in 5 students have seriously considered suicide, and about 1 in 10 have attempted, which is really scary when you start to think about that. When we look specifically at New York State, for 10 to 19-year-olds, they account for about 40% of all emergency department visits for intentional self-harm. And so these are statistics for 2023. So in 2023, there was 5,283 that were treated in emergency departments for intentional self-harm. A little over 2,000 were placed in inpatient for intentional self-harm. And we had 72 suicide deaths, which is 72 too many, right? So Something I like to point out regarding these numbers. So if you look and you see that about 5,200 have been treated in emergency departments for intentional self-harm, and about 2,200 have been hospitalized. There are about 3,000 students then who were treated in emergency departments that are not being placed in inpatient hospitalizations. So we always like to think then, well, where are those students going? The very next day, they're going right back to school, right? So we want to make sure that schools have the knowledge base and the understanding about youth suicide to understand what it is that they need to do and how to support those students and what type of services can they put in place for those students until maybe they can get into some outside therapy. So this chart shows the number of youth suicides in the US from 1999 to 2022. So you can see that since about 2007, there has been this increase that has happened till a peak at 2017, 2018. So feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat, though I can't see your chats right now. What do you think happened in 2007? Guesses? Social media, yes, yes. So in 2004, Facebook was invented. In 2007, the first iPhone or smartphone was released. And it was the advent of social media. There also was an economic recession in 2007, but it was social media. And, we all know that social media has a negative effect on our youth. The Surgeon General, the US Surgeon General came out with a statement saying that the social media has a huge effect on our children and is causing a ton of anxiety and depression. Now, of course, and the kids will tell you that social media does have some great aspects to it. It does help some kids who maybe aren't finding support in their schools find support through other people. But there's the majority of kids at some point in time report that social media has caused them issues in their life. And if you think about it, back to the days when we were in high school, it would take weeks for rumors to get around. And now everyone you know and everyone you don't know instantly knows all of your business. And honestly, they feel like they have the right to comment on it. This is it's a huge issue for kids. So we really also need to think about teaching our kids some online literacy, right? And making sure that they know appropriate things to post, not post, and different things like that. There are some groups that, I can get my slide, there we go. There are some groups that have some higher rates of suicidality. So those who are LGBTQ, right? So on the right or the left-hand side here in the blue, we have the percentage of LGBTQ versus straight or heterosexual students for ideation. So you can see that it's almost 35% for the LGBTQ community compared to 11% for the straight or heterosexual community. And for attempts, it's about 18% compared to about 6%. When you look at the transgender identity, So those who identify either as transgender or unsure of their gender identity, they have an ideation percentage of almost 42% compared to about 14% who do not identify as transgender. And attempts are 36% for those who identify as transgender or not sure of their transgender identity, compared to 7% for those who are not identifying as transgender. So what we want here is we want to, look at things like risk factors for youth suicide and protective factors for youth suicide. And we want this scale to tip in the opposite direction. So when we have a lot of risk factors that are going on for students, we really need to try to pile on those protective factors, right? So that they can then outweigh those risk factors. And we're going to talk about risk factors and protective factors coming up. We're also going to talk about warning signs. And warning signs are those things that really should stop you and say, wow, this person might be at risk for suicide, and I need to start a conversation with them. So let's talk about risk factors for youth suicide. There's a lot of different theories out there about suicide, but all of them kind of talk about these three different areas and the risk factors that involve them. So when we're looking at individual risk factors, the first thing is a previous attempt. Anyone who has had a previous attempt for suicide is at a higher risk of dying by suicide. If there's any type of mental health concern, and a lot of our kids have mental health concerns now, anxiety and depression are the two largest factors that kids are facing right now, and substance use. So we know that when someone is using substances, getting high or getting drunk, that it lowers their inhibitions and they're more likely to do something that maybe they wouldn't have done before. There's some new research now that is also talking about physical health concerns. There's not a ton of it out, but they're saying that that might be another risk factor for individuals. We have relationship risk factors. So anyone who has had a suicide in the family is at higher risk of having suicidal ideation themselves. If there's any type of abuse or assault that has gone on, any meaningful loss, and this is a meaningful loss for that student. So some things that we think aren't that big of a deal, right? Oh, it's your first relationship. You'll have a ton of other opportunities to date people. Don't worry about it. For them, that's a huge loss for them right now. And we need to understand that. And then any type of interpersonal violence. The environmental risk factors, number one way that we can prevent suicide is to limit the access to means. So if we can limit access to guns, pills, different things like that, we can actually save lives. Social rejection at this age, 10 to 19-year-olds, is huge. We already talked about social media, right? And how social media instantly everybody knows. And it seems like everyone's against you, right? It's always those people who are posting like, why would you do that? Or, things like that. So social rejection is so much bigger now for these kids than it was when we were young. And then no access to care. Unfortunately, there are huge waiting lists for youth to be able to get into outside services, right? Youth psychiatrists are at a minimum. And there's a lot of, waiting lists too for anyone who is willing to see a child between the ages of 10 and 19. So there's some things that the state is doing about that. Governor Hochul is huge around youth mental health. She is setting up some programs to try to forgive loan forgiveness for people who are going to go into the field. There's a big push to try to get, those groups who are underrepresented as therapists in the field. So there's a push towards that. And there's a huge push at the Office of Mental Health to put school-based mental health centers in all schools across New York State. And there are grants that are available to schools to try to begin to get like a setup fee, so that if you don't have space in your school and you have to rearrange things to get space and stuff like that, you can use that money specifically for setting up school-based mental health centers in schools. So you might look at these risk factors and you might say, I know someone who, has a mental health concern and has been socially rejected. I might know someone who's just experienced a meaningful loss. So just like risk factors for heart disease doesn't mean that you're absolutely going to have a heart attack. Risk factors for youth suicide don't mean that a student is going to die by suicide or even have suicidal ideation at all. But what's important to know about these things is when you get them all together, or you get more of them, you are at a higher risk. And that means that we need to pay attention to these kids who might be having these risk factors and have open conversations with them. Okay, and we need to then be able to identify and understand the warning signs that might happen. But again, you could also have a student who has a few of these and has no thoughts of suicide at all. You might have a student who has one of these and has thought about suicide. So I have a video here that is going to talk about the warning signs. So those were the risk factors. The warning signs, remember, are that stop sign or that thing that make us stop and say, there might be an issue here and we need to have a conversation. So I do believe I shared my sound, but if you don't hear anything, please speak up and let me know.
Hi, I'm Peter Faustino. We've just talked about a variety of risk factors for suicide. It's important to remember that although risk factors are common, all they tell us is that someone may be at risk for suicide. Just like risk factors for heart disease don't mean that someone will have a heart attack, suicide risk factors are simply indicators of potential risk. But a percentage of your students with risk factors may start to exhibit what we call warning signs. These are the things that tell us to stop and pay immediate attention because a student may be at risk for engaging in suicidal behavior in the near future. The word FACS provides a helpful acrostic for identifying the most commonly recognized warning signs. F stands for feelings: hopelessness, worthlessness, despair about the future, or excessive worry. We should be concerned about students who are exhibiting these types of feelings. A denotes actions. Actions include things like trying to get access to a gun or pills, behaving recklessly, or increasing alcohol or drug use. It can also include showing aggressive behavior that's inconsistent with the student's previous demeanor, self-harming behaviors, or being involved in bullying actions. Something new that's been added to this category is looking online for ways to die. C indicates changes. This is a very important category because it means we're looking for changes from the student's previous attitude, moods, or behaviors which have been noticeable for at least a couple of weeks. For example, students who were active may become withdrawn, quit athletic teams, stop paying attention to personal appearance, daydream, or even fall asleep in the classroom. it would be impossible to list all of the potential behaviors that you might see. So simply concentrating on recognizing changes from previous behaviors is the real key to making assessments in this category. T represents the threats that some students make or hint at. These can be specific statements of intent like, "I'm done with living," or "I'm thinking of killing myself," or worrisome innuendos in writing or other class assignments. Threats may also be posted on social media sites. Whether specific or vague, threats tell us that the student is thinking about death or suicide, and that is what escalates our level of concern. S refers to situations that may serve as triggers for the suicide. These include getting into trouble at home, in school, or with legal authorities, personal losses in relationships, opportunities, or even losses of less tangible things like self-esteem or hopes for the future. Life changes for which the students feel overwhelmed or unprepared, such as moving or the transition after high school graduation, can also serve as triggers. The most worrisome time is between the occurrence of the triggering situation and its resolution, in that period of uncertainty before the outcome is known. So, what do you do if you observe several of these warning signs in one of your students? First of all, you don't have to be certain that suicide is part of the problem at all. If you notice warning signs, especially if you see something that fits into the threat seriously, you want to respond. Treat your concerns the same way you would deal with concerns about any student. What's got your attention are the changes in the student's academic engagement. Focus on specific things you've observed and not try to figure out what's causing them. And remember, while students can disagree with your feelings about them, they can't disagree when you've given them specific and observable examples for your worries. Organize your concerns so that you can talk with the student about them in a structured way. Follow this up with a warm handoff to your designated resource staff. What's a warm handoff? We'll tell you in a couple minutes.
So I shared that video with you. Obviously, they're talking about a school. That's part of a training that we do for school staff, which I'll get into a little bit more. But it's exactly the same thing that families would need to do if they saw these warning signs in, their child. Friends, anything, anyone like that. So, and you can see that, just because, we have these risk factors, doesn't mean that they're going to, be suicidal. But it's when we pay attention to these warning signs, we really need to do something about it. So, as he spoke about, right, feelings. So if they're, a depressed child, they're usually a really happy-go-lucky kid, and they seem kind of depressed now, been moping around for a few days. Can also be, when you look at changes, the other way around, right? Sometimes you have a kind of mopey kid all the time, and all of a sudden they are in the best mood. They are just feeling fabulous. And we think, wow, great, I'm so glad that they're finally happy, right? Well, lots of times when people have decided that they are going to die by suicide and they've made a plan and they know when they're going to do it, they have this huge sense of relief that they're not going to be feeling this pain that they've been feeling for so long any longer. And they actually start to feel better and feel great. So even a change like that is something that we want to pay attention to and just start a conversation. And as Dr. Faustino said, we want to focus our conversation on the facts, right? Those things that we see. So to say, Susie, I've kind of been worried about you. I've noticed that you've kind of been down in the dumps. You used to go out every Friday night with your friends, and you've been home for the past couple of weekends. I know you broke up with your boyfriend. Like, is there something going on? And start that conversation. And if you can always say too, do not be afraid to ask about suicide. So if it gets to that point where they're saying things and you're like, you get that ick feeling in your stomach, then you can say, have you had thoughts of suicide? And you're going to want to know, especially if you're home alone with your child, right? You're going to want to know because you need to know what steps to take next from there. So what do you do if you see warning signs in your child, right? Like I said, express concern. Let them know that you'd like to understand. And then the most important thing is to listen. And it can be so hard sometimes, especially when talking to your own child, right? You want to fix everything, right? We are caregivers. We want to fix things for everyone. And sometimes we just need to stop and listen. And you might be the first person that they've opened up to about this. So they might need some time to get it all out. Let them get it out. Listen. If after you listened, you do have major concern for their safety, don't leave them alone. And then express to them that you might need some more help. So it might sound something like, hey, Susie, I've kind of been worried about you lately. I'd like to kind of know what's going on. These are the things that I have seen. Going through those facts. Then listen. And then if you have concern, say, wow, that sounds like a lot. I'm sorry that you're going through all of this. I think that this is something that I don't know enough about, and I'd like to get you some more help. I know that we can go to the school and get help, or we can call this number and get help, or we can do this to get help, and say, what do you think would be helpful right now? So some common questions around talking with somebody about suicide. People are always worried. Well, I don't want to put it in their head, right? I don't want to give them the idea of suicide. And that is not true. Asking them about it is not going to plant the idea in their head. So many times working with students throughout many, many years, when I've asked them if they'd had thoughts of suicide, I usually get one of three answers. Either, no, miss, that's not it. It's not that bad. Or, yeah, or nothing, and they just kind of put their heads down, which kind of leads me to what their answer is. But no one is, ever said no and then turned around and been suicidal. In fact, many, many times for those kids who have been thinking about it, and maybe they've just been having fleeting thoughts, have not made a plan, have not done anything like that, but having those fleeting thoughts is very, very scary to them. Then it makes them anxious. Then it makes, it's just that tumbleweed effect. Having someone ask them and then be able to say, yeah, I have, and not getting like, no, you wouldn't want to do that. You would, worry your family. And why would you ever do that? Right. But just having somebody listen to what's going on to them helps them get that off their chest. They're not holding that big, big secret in anymore. And they feel so much better afterwards, especially when somebody says, wow, I think we need some more help with this. Or what is it that we can do to try to help you? Another common question we get is, how do I know they're just not trying to get attention? Well, if this is what they're doing to try to get attention, then they need attention. We need to take every time a child says that they have had suicidal thoughts seriously. And we also then, need to teach them some coping skills. But if they don't have those coping skills, and this is the only thing that they can do to get attention, then they need the attention. Lots of times people will think, well, if somebody's talking about it, they're not really serious, right? No, we don't know. We don't know until we have a serious conversation with them. And then the final one is, could talking about it make it worse? No. Like I said earlier, right? Talking about it many times gives these kids a release that they don't have to carry this heavy burden all by themselves anymore. So, no, definitely do not be afraid to ask, right? You're not going to put the idea in their head. If they need to talk with somebody for some reason, and this is how they get the attention to talk with someone, we need to talk to them. And it's talking about it does not make it worse. It makes it better. So I have another video here that I'm going to play, and it's from the Mayo Clinic, and it's a great video. It's great for families and caregivers to understand what kids are thinking and how they're feeling related to youth suicide. Oops. Well, obviously I can't check the chat and do that at the same time. Skip the video and
Big ideas.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy.
I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
Or getting really mad. Not able to sleep, or sleeping too much.
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
Acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late.
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed.
Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself.
It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask.
They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
That's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
you're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing
Yourself.
over.
That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself.
What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help?
We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
A lot of people think about killing themselves. Adults and kids.
most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead.
I can't live with
I'm
this.
gonna kill myself,
Take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself.
Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
but don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts.
Make a list together right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut.
Because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference. All the difference.
In your kid's life.
So it's an emotional video. And it's an emotional video too, especially for those people who are parents who have had to have that conversation with their child. It is not an easy conversation to have with your own child. And if you feel you've seen these warning signs and you feel you're not the best person or don't feel that you can have this conversation with your child, then you need to find someone else who can. And then try to also have the conversation with your child. And like I said, it can be very hard. And for someone who is a therapist who has had to have these conversations with their own children, I just put my therapist hat on and I wasn't mom for a minute. But I've had education for a long time. So don't be afraid to reach out for help. Now here you can see this is a little bit of an older video. It's got the old Suicide Prevention Lifeline on it. The new number is 988. You can call, text, or chat online with 988 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I always tell kids, you don't have to be suicidal to call this number. Don't wait that long. You could have had a bad day and feel that you don't have anyone to talk to, and you want to talk to somebody who's nonpartisan, right? Not biased about whatever is going on with you right now. And you can call and you can talk. You could also call if you're a parent who's concerned about your child and you need some help to start that conversation. If you do have the conversation with your child and they are talking about how they have had these thoughts, you can call 988 together, right? And there's someone on the other side. Mostly the kids don't want to call. I will say that. They would rather text or chat online. But you can call with them and explain the situation. And then somebody on the line will talk with you and talk with you about how, they're feeling at that point in time. And, they can kind of assess how serious the situation is too, right? And at that point, they can give resources if you need some more assistance. Move on to my next slide. There we go. There's also this book, which I will get the email or the website for you at the end and put that in the chat for everyone. This is called Gizmo's Possum Guide to Mental Health. That's Gizmo. He's a little cutie. He is a therapy dog. And the book talks about feelings of being mad, sad, and worried. And sometimes we have these feelings of being mad, sad, and worried, and we don't know what to do with them. And basically what this is kind of like it's based off of the Stanley Brown Safety Plan. So it talks about different things that you can do on your own to try to distract yourself from feeling mad, sad, or worried, right? Or how to reset yourself. But then it also talks about if you do those things and that doesn't help, who are people that you can go to who help you make you feel better? So it's great to use with elementary, even, early middle school students. Also an excellent resource to use with older students who have developmental disabilities. I've used it in high school classrooms with kids with developmental disabilities, and they just love it. There's a website, you can Google it, Gizmo's Possum Guide to Mental Health. It will show you, there's a link where you can get PowerPoints to put up on a smartboard in a classroom, go over it in a classroom. You can order books off of it. You can also order little plush toys off of it. But it also has a ton of activities to go along with it. And it talks about how to do read-alongs. So I've used this with librarians in schools who will come in and, when the kids come into library, they'll sit down, they'll read this book, they'll tell the kids, maybe bring your favorite stuffed animal, and they can, learn along with their favorite stuffed animal about what to do when they're mad, sad, or worried. We've used it also with schools when they've brought in therapy dogs for schools. So a great resource to try to work with some younger students. So I talked a little bit about 988. So 988, again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call, text, or chat online. And there are trained crisis service providers there who will help you walk through everything that you're going to at that point in time. And if needed, they can send support services to you. Other resources, if your child says, no, I've had these thoughts, I don't have a plan, I don't know if I'm going to or whatnot, then you can reach out to your general practitioner or your pediatrician and see if they have any resources within their office or any recommendations for referrals. You can reach out to your school. Schools should have support services in place. Many schools, like I talked about, have school-based mental health centers now, which are outside clinics that are just placed at schools to try to increase that access for support. Especially in more rural areas, it's really hard for these kids to try to get to appointments, especially if there are appointments in the middle of the day. Parents have to take time off of work, go pick up their child, take them to their appointment, go drop them back off at school, and get back to work. So call your school. Talk to them about what's going on. See if there's a social worker there that they can meet with. And then ask them also for a referral list for outside resources. 211 is an excellent resource that unfortunately a lot of people do not know about. You can call 211 and you can get information about a referral for almost anything you could possibly think about. So if you are looking for legal services, you can call, or they have websites. So you can call or go to the website for 211 and, find a lawyer that specializes in car accidents in your area. You can get referrals for mental health supports. You can get information on food banks and where is the local diaper bank. 211 has every type of, community referral source that you could absolutely possibly think about. If you have moved and you're looking for a dentist in your area, you can go to 211 and find all the dentists in your area. And then there's also some specialty groups like the Trevor Project for the LGBTQ community. And you can reach out to them. They have great websites that you can go to and get information specifically for the LGBTQ+ community. And then that is our website, the preventsuicideny.org. And on our website, there are a ton of resources for families, but a ton of resources for schools also. We have handouts that you can have for parents, for students, and for staff members about what each one of those groups needs to know about youth suicide. It gets into the facts and how to identify, gets into how to start that conversation and how to make that referral to a mental health professional for further assessment. So highly recommend you check out our website. And again, do not be afraid to call 988. Even if you're a parent who is concerned about your child and you want to get more information, you can call 988. So we talked about these protective factors, right? And how we want the protective factors to outweigh the risk factors. The number one protective factor for a child, not only for youth suicide, but also for school dropout, teen pregnancy, and things like that, is having a trusted adult in their lives. If they can have a trusted adult, someone they can feel that they can go to when they have a concern and that they're not going to be judged, that is the number one protective factor for students. When I work with schools, I always tell them that they should have their students identify who is a trusted adult in their lives, who is a trusted adult for them inside school, who is a trusted adult for them outside of school, and actually to say, how would you get a hold of that person? How would you contact them? And because it is such an important protective factor for students. Another important protective factor is school connectedness, feeling like they belong. Connectedness in itself is a protective factor. Kids spend the majority of their time in school. And if they don't feel like they belong in school, that's a long day of feeling like you don't fit in. So if we can try to find a way for kids to feel connected in school, and one of those ways is to have a trusted adult or someone that they can go to. It's very, very important. So looking at what are the clubs and organizations at your school that help kids feel connected? Do you have a GSA or some sort of, PFLAG, some sort of LGBTQ plus, group that kids can belong to and feel like they feel connected to school? Are there different types? There's gaming clubs, there's sports, there's theater, but do we have something for every single kid? I know a bunch of different schools just started esports, and a bunch of kids who did nothing else in school joined the esports team. Or even the gaming club for those kids who like to play, Dungeons and Dragons or Pokemon or different things like that. Social emotional learning is another extremely important protective factor. We want our schools and our families to teach social emotional learning, right? Teaching things like emotion regulation. So when they get all upset, what is a way that they can calm yourself? Different things like that. Teaching them, how to identify those things that are bothering them, right? And how to actually communicate about that. Teaching them how to reach out for help when they need it. We also talked about access to care and talked a little bit about the things that the government is doing and the Office of Mental Health around access to care. So, look at your schools and see what services do they have and what services as a PTA can we help them bring into the schools. And then opportunities to contribute. And this could be in or outside of school. So even looking at maybe those kids who, don't necessarily feel connected or like there's any way to contribute within school, what type of groups outside of school do that they feel that they have meaning for them, right? And that they are important. And that group, is a group because they contribute to that. So things like church groups or outside youth clubs like the Boys and Girls Club or different things like that. Are there ways that they can help make their community a better place? So increasing opportunities for kids to contribute to their school and their community. So I talked a little bit about how Governor Hochul and the Office of Mental Health did these youth mental health listening sessions around the state last summer. And this is what the kids are saying, that the impact of the pandemic varied among youth. Some of them not being in school and doing school online. And what does that really say, though? That they aren't connected to school and there's something going on, right? And then others, that was horrible for them. Kids who couldn't do sports when sports is their outlet for everything. Different things like that. Kids who that is their social connection is school. It was very hard for them. That they youth understand the benefits and the risks of social media. And that they really want to develop positive peer relationship and social skills. And that it's hard to do that and they need help developing those interpersonal skills and friendships. Unfortunately, that's what social media has done, because they don't have to have a conversation with somebody because they just go like this and they text them or whatever. And they don't know how to meet a new person next to them in class and start a conversation with them. And I thought that was just so interesting that they were able to pick up on that Number 4, they highly value confidentiality. And when their confidentiality is violated, it deters them from seeking help. So when talking with a child that you think, might be suicidal, you might want to be straightforward with them and say, look, I can keep all of the reasons why you're feeling that way to myself, and I won't share that with other people, but I have to share with somebody else the way you're feeling because I need help with that, and I can't help with that. But knowing the difference, right, between confidentiality and not, spreading rumors about everybody. That kids are kind of saying that they feel there's a lack of empathy and cultural sensitivity in adults, that we don't understand what it's like to be a kid now. And sometimes I think that we really need to stop and think about that, right? Like we really need to be like, wow, yeah, that's with social media, everybody knows exactly what's going on and you don't have any privacy. Or, the fact like group chats, where they start a group chat and there's 12 of what they thought were their friends who started a group chat without them and they're all talking about them. They don't feel that the adults really understand all of that. And then also that they want increased accountability for other students, teachers, and school policies. Especially amongst the LGBTQ plus community, they felt that DASA, or the Dignity for All Students Act, doesn't have any teeth to it, right? That there really aren't consequences for these kids who are throwing around the F word in school like it's nothing. And they walk down the hall and they hear it all the time. And no one is turning them in. Teachers are saying, just ignore them. They're dumb. Don't worry about them. Just ignore them. So why do we have this if there's really no teeth to it? So they really want other students, teachers, because they have said also that teachers will say things too, to be held accountable. You see this, there's a website here that you can actually get all of this information from about the youth listening tours. There's a report and you can actually go to the OMH website and put in youth mental health listening tour report and it will pop up for you. So this is what kids are saying about youth mental health. This is what they think that we should be doing about it. They want youth involved in making policies and designing programs. Don't just design some after school program and it have no relation to what kids really want, right? And when you're making policies, talk to kids, talk to them, get what's happening and what's going on. They want to strengthen and start, right, youth-led programs. And there's some really good youth-led suicide prevention programs out there. One of them is called Sources of Strength. It's an evidence-based suicide prevention program that is youth-led. There's also the Hope Squad. There's lots of different youth-led programs that can be brought to your schools that might be a suicide prevention program, but they don't really talk about suicide, right? And that's the best part of it, right? They talk about health in general and help-seeking behaviors and being there for each other and different things like that. They want adults trained on how to support young people. And the state listened to that and they increased funding towards the Youth Mental Health First Aid Program. So if people go to the Mahaney site, which is the Mental Health Association of New York State, you can see how you can get free youth mental health first aid training. They want us to invest in community-based resources for recreation and mental wellness promotion. They want safe, healthy things to do outside of school. That they feel that schools have a critical role in mental health promotion, prevention, and intervention, and they want schools to do something about it. Again, this is where they spend the majority of their time. They want youth to vet the training on navigating social media to youth and parents. They want to look at it and see like, yes, that makes sense to us. That is something I can relate to, instead of, putting in some, this is your brain on drugs type of training for them. And they want increased resources for no cost and low cost mental health care. Even with having school-based mental health clinics, if schools or if a child has a high deductible insurance, they can have rates anywhere from $100 to, I've heard recently, up to $280 per session. And so that's not really access to care when a family has to feed their, 2 other children. So low cost or no cost mental health care. And the Office of Mental Health is looking into this to see what type of programs can we develop to have in schools that would provide no cost mental health care to the students. So what else can schools do? This is a guide that we produced, and it's called the Guide for Suicide Prevention in New York Schools. You can find it on our website. Again, that's preventsuicideny.org. And this will walk schools through step by step the process of developing a suicide safer school. And I'm going to go through that a little bit now with you. So this is the part of the program where I kind of get into what is available to schools through the Suicide Prevention Center of New York. So we have trainings available free of charge. Sometimes schools say, oh, we have money for professional development, and then we can say, oh, okay, here would be the fee if you need it, if you can pay. But if you can't, that's absolutely fine, and we will still provide these services to you. We base our framework for Suicide Safer School off of this framework here. So basically, what we work with schools to do is to help them build, first of all, this strong foundation in policies and procedures. And we help them build policies and procedures in these 4 different areas. So schools should have set up policies and procedures around training their faculty and their staff, around building resiliency in students, around having a plan to help students who might be at risk for suicide, and then having a plan for not just a suicide death, but any traumatic loss in a school. And what's important is to encompass that with family engagement and community partnerships. So one of the first trainings that we like to offer schools is our Creating Suicide Safety in Schools. It's a full-day training. We ask schools to bring a team of people to the training, and we can come to schools and do it at your school for you. We say we like a team because we like to have at least one administrator there. They tend to know what type of funding and what type of programming is coming down the pipe. And then also they're the ones who have the ability to say, yes, we can do this in our school, or no, we won't. And then a mental health staff, right? Those who, school counselors, school psychs, school social workers, those who kind of have the heartbeat on what's going on for mental health in the schools. And then sometimes they'll have like a school nurse or a resource officer or someone like that who might be part of that team. So they come and we do a needs assessment with them on those 4 different areas, right? And we help them identify their strengths and weaknesses. From there, we help them build an action plan for creating a suicide safer school. And then we will do follow-up with them to see how they're doing and help them through that process. The rest of our trainings, we kind of look at a multi-tiered system of support. So you've probably seen the triangle before, right? So our suicide safety for teachers and school staff is kind of our tier 1 training. It's that basic awareness training that we want all school staff to receive. So when I say all school staff, I mean anyone who could encounter a child who might be upset, or anyone who can see in a child, there's some changes in this kid, okay? And then, you know, to know what to do if they have concerns about them. So people often forget the bus drivers. They're the first people who see the kids in the morning and the last one to see them in the afternoon. If they're, you know, see something that was very different in the afternoon than in the morning, like what's going on? Maybe something happened. It's a short training. It's only about, you know, an hour and a half long. It can easily be done within a staff meeting. It has some brief videos. One of them was with Dr. Faustino that you saw earlier. And we can train trainers in your school district. So if there's a social worker or something who's willing to get trained as a trainer, we can train them, and then they can turn around and train all the school staff in their building. But everybody should know what to do if they're concerned about a student. I also suggest our training trains school staff, but we can also give you suggestions for trainings to offer students on what to do if you're concerned about a friend, and families for what to do if you're concerned about one of your child's. The next, so this training gets into those risk factors and those warning signs, and more importantly, talks about what to do, how to start that conversation, and how to make that warm handoff or that referral to the mental health professionals in the building. And then this here, our helping students at risk for suicide, is our training for the mental health staff. So this is a full day workshop that gets into how do you do a suicide assessment using the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale? How do you do a safety plan using the Stanley Brown Safety Plan? And what's nice about this, it's very much school focused. It's not clinically focused. So we very much get into how do you work with families if there's a student who is at risk? How do you help that and support that student who's coming back from maybe an inpatient or an ED visit? And how do you support that student when they come back to school? And then our final or our tier 3 training is that crisis team training. So, and again, like I said, it's not just for a suicide loss, it can be for any traumatic loss. And we get into identifying roles and responsibilities, who should be on your team, what should be done in the first 24 to 72 hours after a loss. How do you identify grief in students? Because it comes out in different ways depending on their age. We talk about comfort rooms or care stations and what should you do and what shouldn't you do? How do you support students in grief? How do I identify those students who might be vulnerable, right? And who are going to need some more support. And then we get into long-term things like memorials and how to do those safely. So those are all of our trainings, and that's kind of the end of my presentation. I have here, again, our website, the preventsuicideny.org. Like I said, there's a ton of resources on there available to you. Our training email is spcny.training@omh.ny.gov. If you're interested in getting any of the trainings to your school, you can reach out to that email, or you can reach out to me at kristen.stanton@omh.ny.gov. And I'll stop sharing. I know that was long. I really appreciate everybody staying on and listening. I tried to shove as much information as I thought would be interesting to you guys in as short of amount of time as I could.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I took notes, I wow, that's amazing. Thank you. We did get some questions in the chat. We have about 10 minutes, so can we give you a couple? Oh,
Sure, absolutely.
okay. So how about if someone has attempted suicide or is thinking about it and you call 911, or what happens next? What can, let's say a parent, what can you expect to happen after that phone call?
So I would say, if you are, with someone who's thinking about suicide, I would call 988 first. If you come across someone who has attempted already, absolutely call 911 because they need to get checked out medically, right? Or if you are with someone who it is obvious that they are in a crisis and it's imminent, that they say, yes, this is what I'm going to do it, absolutely call 911 to get them help. So what happens is, if like I kind of talked about 988 before, right? A trained counselor is on the line to kind of walk through and kind of assess where you are, and to give resources if necessary. And honestly, they can also call 911 if they feel there's an intimate concern and have services sent. But when 911 is called, it honestly depends across the state of kind of what happens. Obviously, if you say an attempt was already made, you're probably going to have police show up and an ambulance. And they will probably at that point say, yes, the child needs to go to the ER to get checked out medically. If they're kind of like they haven't had an attempt, but they're saying they're at risk, depending on where you are, some rural communities don't have a lot of resources available as far as crisis response teams, but a lot of more, city, urban areas, suburbs, bigger counties do have crisis response teams where trained social workers are able to respond to that event and to talk with the person. And this doesn't have to just be a child, it can be anyone, and talk with the person and really assess where they are at that point and if they need immediate assistance and need to go to the hospital or not. And actually some rural communities are starting this. I was at a conference and it was one on the St. Lawrence River. I can't remember exactly which county it was. It was around Watertown area, I think. And whenever there was a loss or an attempt, or they were calling because someone was at risk, they were able to send a team that would go and would support the family and support the person that was at risk. So it's getting better, but law enforcement is also supposed to be trained in this area. Some are better than others, and you're going to find that anywhere. Some doctors have better bedside manners than others, right? But if there's also the concern, because if a child especially says to an officer, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to do it, then they have the ability to take the child, even if the parent says, no, I don't want them to. So that's just something to think about too.
Thank you. Great information. Joan, you have a question?
If someone put in the chat, what would be the first step if your child's friend comes to you and alerts you that they think that the child is going to commit suicide? What would the first thing the parent would do or should do?
So the first thing is if they have that other parent's contact information, I would immediately try to reach out to that parent. Find out where the child is, right? Is the child home? Is the child have somebody else that's home with them? And if they, number two, aren't home or don't have any, they're home, but there's nobody with them, I would call 911. I would call 911. You can always have a wellness check done, give them the information. And we say this for teachers too. Teachers build great relationships with kids, right? Sometimes they give them their phone numbers, and sometimes those kids reach out to them on the weekends, and they can't reach out to their school counselor to say, help me. So we tell them also that if they're home and they say their parents are home, try to contact their parents and say, here's what's going on. But if there's no one home or you don't know how to get a hold of that parent, you can call 911 and give them as much information that you have. And what's nice, especially with school resource officers, if you can just say their name is Johnny Jones and they go to Smith Academy, they can then go through and see what they can find, see if there's a resource officer who's at that school. They have that resource officer's contact information. Try to contact them to then, get more information about where the child may live. So there are things that they can do, but don't be afraid to call 911.
So we got another comment in the chat. It says, I would love to see some materials specifically for neurodivergent friends, even for those who are more high function. It is really hard to talk, especially when they are dysregulated. Expression of themselves when dysregulated can be all over the map. Thank you for the information. That's the last sentence.
Yeah, I don't have, like, off the top of my head, a ton of resources for that, but I would be happy to look into that some more. So if that person wants to jot down my email, I can type it in the chat here, and feel free to email me and I will see what I can get.
Terrific. What about, I know you presented about helping the schools, but there is a comment, shouldn't all teachers and staff have to take a workshop on the signs of at-risk students, which I know doesn't happen in every district, but what are your thoughts?
Personally, absolutely. Absolutely. The Office of Mental Health feels that every school employee should be trained in youth mental health. Unfortunately, we don't have the power to tell state ed what they need to do. And in working with schools, many of them understand the importance of this, but because it's not a mandate, unfortunately, their time is really focused on those things that are mandated that they have to get done. The state ed does say that schools should do this. In fact, they built a recommendation guidance off of our work, but they cannot tell schools that they have to do it. So what I think you should do is write your politicians and let them know that you think this is important, and try to get mandates in place. I can't do that as a state employee, but it's unfortunately it's not a mandate. But yes, we believe it should be.
I agree. And then we had another question, and it was about in supporting your child or students after suicide attempt or discussion, how long should the support be available?
So I would, with all things, it's going to ebb and flow, right? So you want to always have the support available when they need it, right? As they, go through the recovery, they're going to start to feel better, and they're going to say, no, I'm good. I don't need to go anymore. I don't think I need to see them anymore. And that might be, but that support really always needs to be open for them to come back to. Or when you start to see things again, to say, hey, Johnny, I've noticed, these other few things again. Would you like me to try to make an appointment with Dr. Smith again? Or maybe you should reach out to your social worker at school again and see if you can, get to see them. So there's no like definitive, they should be seen for 6 months, because it really kind of depends on the student and the situation that they're in.
Thank you so much. We have time for, I think, one other question, if anyone has anything they want to throw into the chat. No, I think your presentation was so all encompassing with info. It was amazing that you answered most of the questions that we had.
Well, I really encourage you all to go back to your schools in your area and let them know that you came to this presentation and we have all these services available to them for free, and the schools can feel free to reach out to me. Or if you want to reach out to me and give me names of people that I should try to contact at your schools, I'm happy to do presentations for them also, of all the different services we have available. And please check out our websites. And there's tons and tons of information there for you.
So there is one last question. It says, do you ever do presentations for other nonprofits like Scouts?
Yes, actually, we did start doing a training called, we shortened it to STAR. So it's basically for, community types of things like Scouts, where we go through the same exact thing of, you're concerned about a student, and say you are on a scouting trip. So how do you do an assessment? How do you know if that student's really at risk? And then when do you make that referral, call the parent with, with concerns? So yes.
Terrific. Well, we'd like to thank you, Kristen, for joining us this evening and hosting such an impactful and insightful webinar on youth suicide. Your dedication to raising awareness and providing valuable information is truly appreciated. Tonight's discussion was not only informative, but also deeply meaningful, offering practical resources and support for such an important issue. So we thank you for your commitment and thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Learned a lot. Beth?
So thank you all for joining us tonight for this webinar and engaging in this vital and very difficult conversation about youth suicide. This topic touches many lives, and your presence here shows your commitment to making a difference. As you leave us this evening, remember the power of listening, supporting, and connecting. Together, we can help to create a safer, more compassionate environment for our youth. Please don't hesitate to reach out for resources or support such as 988, OHM, and Mahani's. Continue to be advocates for awareness and continue to open up a mental health dialogue in your homes. Look for our next webinar, where we will have a parent-to-parent panel discussion on mental health. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.